Hello, friends. I'm back. For more, The Hoopa Project by David Paulides, Bigfoot Encounters in California. Photon be in the chat. He's just really spitting some fucking blasphemy right now. I love how the Skinwalker gang has injected Juggalo culture into its cult, much like the Nation of Islam injected Dianetics. I say that's not the same. He says Juggalos are the Nation of Islam of the music world. K-pop stans are the Scientologists. Okay. No, I like the Juggalo shit because it feels uniquely mine. Nobody else has taken, like, Juggalo symbolism and made it, like, explained it as if it were actually esoteric religion. And I feel like ICP probably could do that. That's not what they're paid for. That's not what their people want to hear about. So you never hear that from ICP. I will do that for you, ICP. Violent J, Shaggy 2 Dope. I will spread the word of the Dark Carnival throughout the lands. To the Mecca of Thornville, Ohio. Whoop whoop. Much like Big Smoke, the Bigfoot-like creature known to inhabit that area. Big Smoke is his name. I've seen him. Maybe we can get into some reading, huh? What the people come here for. Chapter 3. Bigfoot Sightings Overview. We are getting into the meat and potatoes here. Hopefully this will be an interesting chapter. I know the next one is like, it's actual reports from specific people, times and places, and all the intricacies with like pictures of these goofballs. Looking forward to the next chapter. This one should be good too. I've documented a combined total of 48 Bigfoot sightings and incidents in and around the Hoopa Reservation. I have purposely put the list into two categories for a variety of reasons. Sightings are instances where the witness has claimed specifically to have seen a Bigfoot. An incident is where the witness has claimed to have observed activity related to that of a Bigfoot. Sightings reports require the witness to sign an affidavit. Incidents generally do not. However, some of the incidents were very unusual, and in those cases I did request that an affidavit be signed. Each list was categorized, starting with the oldest sighting or incident and going forward to the most recent. This list represents an exhaustive effort to find credible witnesses and confirmed Bigfoot sightings. The list has been studied for many months and numerous interesting facts have emerged. It should be emphasized that almost all third-hand stories have been excluded. The Georgia Campbell story is included because of the odd location and because it was her niece who told us of the incident. The first oddity of the list is the break-in sightings from 1988 to 1996. It was almost as though Hoopa had folded up and disappeared from Bigfoot visits for 12 years. There is also a significant 9-year time break from 1975 to 1984. The monthly breakdown of sightings doesn't indicate any two consecutive months where there are no Bigfoot sighting reports. So we have in January, 0 Bigfoots. Sighting, what the hell's going on here? 0 Bigfoots. Monthly Bigfoot sighting list. Yeah, this is laid out weird. I'm terrible with these. Roll them up and smoke them, I say, these spreadsheets. January, 0 Bigfoot sightings. February, 2 Bigfoot sightings. March, 0. April, 1. May 3, June 0, July 4, August 4, September 2, October 1, November 7, December 1. So, like you're saying, while you do have breaks from time to time, a month where there are no sightings, there aren't 2 consecutive months like that. The one significantly high month for Hoopa Bigfoot sightings is November. The only important food source that flourishes in that month is a high number of fish in the river. There are large quantities of salmon and steelhead that are simultaneously occupying the Trinity. Hello, chart and graph and bullcrap. Let's go back. There are large quantities of salmon and steelhead that are simultaneously occupying the Trinity and taking adjacent feeder streams. Mill Creek, Supply Creek, Tish Tang, Camel Creek. Since November, November is the first month when the river has a high number of these large fish. This may account for the large number of Bigfoot sightings. The location of the fish in the feeder streams may also be reason why you will later see that there are large numbers of sightings near these listed creeks. Perhaps Bigfoot fills up on fish in November and then gets tired of that diet. November is also one of the first months that bears would hibernate in the area, if they do. Let's go back and look at this fucking spreadsheet, dude. Alright, so we have a bunch of sightings here, ranging from 1956 to 2006. I won't go over fucking names exactly. We'll try to make some correlations if we can. The descriptions are more what I'm interested in. Mom and smaller Bigfoot in a sighting. Bigfoot in creek. Arm reaches into the room. Those are the best sightings. One Bigfoot in a field. Adolescent Bigfoot. Bigfoot. Why did the Bigfoot cross the road? To look in the window, it turns out. Bigfoot crosses road again. Bigfoot seen. Bigfoot crosses road. Bigfoot seen. Seen. Female Bigfoot seen. Oh, baby. He knew that was a female, too. Fucking jugs like that, dude. Bigfoot seen. Seen. See Bigfoot. See Bigfoot running. See Bigfoot jumping off a cliff, apparently. Chasing deer. Seen with berries. Berries, berries, berries. Keep that in mind, always. Bigfoot in garbage, exactly where he belongs. That's where we put him. Squatting in the road, taking a big dookie dump. Running across the road, two Bigfoot seen. Bigfoot walking. Crossing the road, big and small Bigfoot. Seen. Bigfoot seen. Seen near creek. Bigfoot seen. Seen walking. If we look at the times, the one thing we can kind of gather from this is it's clear that, like, 9 p.m. to, like, midnight are probably that's the most common area of sightings. Most common time frame. You have a lot in the wee hours of the morning, too. Bald Hills Road. Bald Hills Road keeps coming up again. Bigfoot crosses that road often, as it would seem. A total of 33 sightings. Freemasons confirmed. Times of Bigfoot sightings chart. Midnight, 3 sightings. 1 a.m., 0, 2 a.m., 0, 3 a.m., 0, 4 a.m., 1 sighting, 5 a.m., 1 sighting, 6 a.m., 3 sightings, 7 a.m., 0 sightings, 8 a.m., 1 sighting, 9 a.m., 1, 10 a.m., 1, 11 a.m., 0, noon, 5 sightings, 1 p.m., 3 sightings, 2 p.m., 1, 3 p.m. 0, 4 p.m. 1, 5 p.m. 0, 6, 0, 7, 0, 8 p.m. 4, 9 p.m. 3 sightings, 10 p.m. 3 sightings, 11 p.m. 1 sighting, midnight 3 sightings. The time graph of a Bigfoot sighting shows that few are seen between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. The logical answer to this is that there are very few people from Hoopa out during that time of night. The one sighting at 4 a.m. was a supermarket manager on his way to work. Many Bigfoot researchers believe that the creature is nocturnal. I am not sure. However, our data in Hoopa indicates that the creature has a preference of night versus day. The category of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. includes 13 sightings of the 32 total. During the summer, the days are longer, and we can logically extend daylight hours till at least 8 p.m. And that would raise the daylight sighting numbers to 17. More than half of the 32 total sightings. But we do have to reconcile the fact that a vast majority of people are not outside from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., and thus a Bigfoot sighting could not be made. From noon to 3 p.m., there are 9 sightings reported. The answer to this may be that people are on their lunch hour and out in the woods, but I doubt that accounts for the entire reason. This region gets significant rainfall during winter months, and as such the sky is cloudy a lot during the day. If Bigfoot tries to avoid bright light and the heat of the day, this may be the reason it enjoys Hoopa and the North Coast. I think it is interesting that during the winter, the sky does get dark early at 5 p.m. The time frame from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. would be a time when a lot of people are on the road, going home from work, going to the store, etc. There are no sightings reported during that time frame. Yep. Another chart graph. It might be possible that Bigfoot has learned to stay away from the roads during the dinnertime commute. It's possible. Let's look at this map real quick. Got some sightings. Piece of shit map, doesn't really tell us anything. Yeah, there's dots everywhere, gotcha. So, you know, Bigfoot's an intelligent creature. It would learn some behaviors. It would learn to not be where humans are. It seems like that's its #1 survival technique, is just simply to not be seen, not be noticed. You might be, like, right next to one, and, you know, theoretically, most of the time, people wouldn't even realize it. So they would avoid avoid roads. Like, it's not that fucking deer can't do it. It sucks for them, but a Bigfoot probably could. And then, like, there are troops of chimpanzees, or I want to say it was chimpanzees in Africa, that have been reported to go nocturnal, to have the awareness to choose to be nocturnal, because that's when there's less of a threat to them. So it makes sense for Bigfoot. DJ says, you should, Yakov. I only see weird hipsters covering ICP and Juggalos. It's time for Skinwalker Gang to do a doc. You're telling me, brother. You're telling me. Promises were not kept. From many people. And here we are with no doc. Whatever. We'll make it happen. Photon says, big old furry tits. Witnessing a Bigfoot suicide. Yeah, jumping off the cliff, most definitely. He's got a house off that road, Bald Mills or whatever it was. Yakov spreading ICP helter skelter. Not yet, not yet. Don't tell Violent J that. Look, he's called Violent J, but he's actually a pacifist now. Excuse me. Bigfoot incidents. A witness to activity or behavior that is likely attributed to Bigfoot is included in this category. The activity cited in this category may be rock throwing, screaming, odors, footprints, bipedal stalking on a trail, and any other physical evidence likely left by a Bigfoot. So screaming, rocks, screams, rocks, footprints, scat, footsteps, scat, you step in the scat. That's the luckiest Bigfoot sighting. Same old, same old. Yeah, rock throwing, footsteps, scat, screams. There's been a large increase in Bigfoot incidents in the last years. Incidents were fairly consistent at 2 per decade for the previous 40 years, and then a steep escalation occurred. The most common incident is seeing footprints or hearing bipedal steps. Seeing the footprints is significant in this region because almost everyone in the reservation knows the difference between a Bigfoot print and a bear print. A visitor coming from the city may mistake a large bear print for a Bigfoot print, but I do not think any seasoned tribal member would make that mistake. What do we got over here? Hoopa Reservation Area Map. Look at that, baby. Yep. Bunch of Indians on that. There are several incidents where Bigfoot has thrown large boulders in the general direction of the witness, all being thrown from a ridgeline. None of the boulders get close to hitting the people, but they are close enough to catch their attention. The boulders that are thrown are huge, some over 100 pounds, all being thrown in the general direction of the witness. I doubt there is anyone in the world that could throw a 10-pound rock 200 yards. Yet people are claiming that they see 100-pound boulders flying over 200 yards in the air. The only scenario I could imagine prior to investigating Bigfoot, where a boulder of 100 pounds could be thrown 200 feet, would be a catapult or a volcano, not by any animal or human. Many of the rock-throwing incidents are in conjunction with screaming that witnesses state does not come from any normal animal in the forest. The Camel Creek, Tishtang, and Trinity River region was a very hot spot for Bigfoot incidents. I find all of this focus on the time frames very interesting because he's talking about like areas of time where there were less reported sightings and more, and how it's picking up. I wonder what that's implying. I really don't know. Activity for the last 40 years. The Hoopa Reservation Sightings Map is an overview of the entire region where I investigated Bigfoot sightings and incidents. On page 196, do I have to flip to this? I'll flip to it. I'll do it because I love you guys. 78, remember that if I don't. 196. 196, baby. I've gone too far this time. Ah! Dude! Is he that handsome? Could he really be that handsome? My God. That's actually... That's not even Bigfoot. That's like a reconstruction of Jesus. Man, it's beautiful. Dude, I've gone too far. Spoiler alert, everybody. We got spoilers. Where am I? Fucking maps. It's the wrong map. This is the right stupid fucking map. Hoopa Reservation Bigfoot Sightings map. We got some yellow, we got some red. Red are the sightings, yellow are the incidents. Surprising amount of sightings versus incidents. Do you think there would be a lot more incidences than there are sightings? But here we are. Let's go back to 78. Fucking useless ass map. Bones. We're almost there. Yellow dots indicate the location of Bigfoot incidents, and red are actual sightings. I decided to use the entire area around the reservation to collect sightings because Bigfoot is a very mobile creature that can migrate and wander tens of miles per day. There does appear to be a large accumulation of sightings and incidents inside the reservation. A skeptic may claim that the reservation is where the population is, thus the sightings would likely be made there. The irony of the map is that Willow Creek claims it is the Bigfoot capital of the world, yet I couldn't find one witness to a sighting or incident inside of the Willow Creek limit or vicinity. The closest witness I could find was a Hoopa teacher, who saw a Bigfoot in the Trinity River outside of Willow Creek. Bluff Creek is located at the top of the map and is obviously famous in Bigfoot lore, yet I couldn't find anyone who had seen or heard of any recent activity in that area. The sighting at the far top right corner of the map at Dillon Creek was made by a Hoopa tribal member and is within the normal range of their travels. The sightings on Bald Hills Road are just on the outside fringe of the reservation. The Hoopa Reservation map highlights the sightings made inside the reservation. Most of the sightings are in the north end near Mill Creek Road. The sightings in this area are not a new occurrence. They have been happening since the 60s. This map makes it appear that many of the sightings are located adjacent to a creek or valley, which is reality. This may be occurring because this is where the roads and residences are located and people are visiting and lounging. The other viable reason for the creek or valley sightings is that this is where Bigfoot is finding food sources: fish, berries, grasses, etc. I can attest that the creek area above the residences on Lower Mill Creek Road have huge quantities of berries growing along its bank. Hoopa Reservation Sightings map, baby. I have also been in this area while the salmon and steelhead are in the rivers and there are large numbers of fish that are breeding in Upper Mill Creek. It's a beautiful sight. Bigfoot Alley. This is an aerial view. Where is the aerial view? Aerial view. There we go. Bigfoot Alley, baby. This is an aerial view of the region on the north end of the urban area of the reservation. The Trinity River is in the middle of the picture. Mill Creek is just inside the lower black line and Transmitter Hill, and the region inside of Bald Hills Road is at the top left of the photo. Okay. Top left is Bald Hills. That's where Bigfoot lives. I have coined this region Bigfoot Alley, for an obvious reason. Transmitter Hill has a ridge that slowly drops in elevation until it meets the Trinity River in the area where Winkle White had a screaming... Winkle White? That's a goofy name. He had a screaming incident and saw a footprint. I thought Winkle White was going to be a place. That's like the name of some mountain. The area of Mill Creek Road has a ridge above it that also drops until it disappears at Highway 96 in Carpenter Lane. Carpenter Lane, that's a place, but it sounds like it could be a name. Winkle White is a name, but it sounds like it should be a place. Whatever. If the statement of the Yurok Bigfoot is a ridgewalker is correct, then this area is prime for an interaction. Charles and Inker McCovey each had sightings at the far right side of this region, and both were either on or very near a ridge. The reasons why Bigfoot frequents the specific area are easy to understand. There are huge berry bushes that line the streets of Carpenter Lane, Mill Creek, and the Mill Creek neighborhood. The Trinity River and Mill Creek each have runs of salmon and steelhead. Local fishermen have nets set specifically at the location where Winkle White saw the footprint and heard the screams. It would seem appropriate that if a Bigfoot were to cross the Trinity River, this would be an optimum location, ridgeline to ridgeline. The area to the left side of the river is the area you would travel west and end up in Redwood National Park. If a creature was fleeing horrible conditions in the coastal region, this would be an avenue of escape. In reverse, if Bigfoot was avoiding adverse conditions in the Trinity Alps of the Marble Mountains, this would be the area where it would have the first opportunity to cross the river without being in a heavily congested urban environment, downtown Hoopa. If the creature was attempting to cross the river in the northern portion of the reservation or further north of the top of the aerial view, it would have an extremely difficult proposition. The area north of the picture is laden with cliffs plummeting from Highway 96 down to the river. Laden with cliffs plummeting from Highway 96 down to the river. The sighting report from witness Clifford Marshall indicates that Bigfoot will leap off the cliff if forced, though that probably isn't its normal behavior. Really, dude, suicidal Bigfoots doing flips off the mountainsides. The area I've described by Carpenter Lane would again be the optimum place to cross if you were traveling south from Weichpeck and were looking for an easy access point to each of the hillsides, Mill Creek and Transmitter Hill. Bigfoot Alley has 14 of the 33 Bigfoot sightings documented, which gives it 42% of all sightings. It has 5 of the 15 of the Bigfoot sightings, or 33% of all incidents. These are astronomically high numbers considering the relatively small area it encompasses on the reservation. I seriously wonder if there is any other place in the world like Bigfoot Alley. I believe that this region deserves a serious scientific study with a team committed to staying for the long haul over several seasons, and with a large contingent of fourth-generation night optics to watch the crossings and document the behavior. It would be fascinating. The region just to the east of the reservation boundary, and also east of the outside perimeter of Bigfoot Alley, is the Trinity Alps Wilderness area. This region has always had a high incidence of Bigfoot sightings based on the numbers of visitors who walk in, which is few. There is one Bigfoot incident report on the BFRO.net website regarding the Trinity Alps that made me take notice. The report states that there were approximately 10 people that took pack mules in the Trinity Alps Wilderness area in September of 1980. They were there for a 10-day deer hunt of the region with some camping and outdoor enjoyment. It was a 4-hour trek into the wilderness before they set up their camp. After the first day of not seeing any bucks, 2 individuals decided to set up a deer blind on a nearby ridgeline that occupied a small saddle. After setting the blind and getting into their bags for the night, they started to hear a series of loud screams coming from an area of trees 100 feet below them. The witnesses described the screams as something similar to the sound of a woman who was being murdered. The screams continued for several sequences until they ended with a very deep and different type of scream. This is making me think that Bobcat Goldthwait, How do you say that? The actor or comedian or whatever he is, he made a Bigfoot movie called Willow Creek, and I get the sense that he read this before he made that movie. No spoilers. I would recommend it. Not a great movie, but by the end you get this payoff that's kind of right up the alley of all of it, right up Bigfoot Alley, if you catch my drift, and something that like you don't see in Bigfoot movies. How many Bigfoot movies are there? Can you name some? Probably, but they all suck. This one's got a good payoff. Once the screaming stopped for several minutes, they then heard their mule emit a horrendous noise. The animal was located approximately 100 yards from them, on a small meadow. Each camper grabbed a rifle and went to the mule's aid. They had small flashlights and didn't see anything obviously wrong other than the mule's knee was swollen. They walked the mule to a location near their tent, and all of them then had a peaceful night. The next morning, the mule was examined, and they found that its knee was almost double its normal size. This is quite unusual, as it is physically impossible for a mule to twist or injure its knee on its own. Mules are very stable creatures. It was the opinion of the others that something with hands tried to break the mule's leg, and in the process of twisting, injured its knee. After a few days, the mule was better and could continue its hauling. So, that almost sounds like the Bigfoot could have tried to scare them off. To know that it wanted the mule, to know that there was prey there, and they wanted to get rid of any competition. But then the sound of a woman being murdered, that sort of scream. That's strange. You wouldn't think a Bigfoot would sound like a woman. Yeah, there's woman Bigfoots, but they're still probably like 7 feet tall, right? It's not going to sound like a woman. Get that mule hauling. After a few days, the mule was better and it fucking got hauling. The report has several aspects to it that fall into the categories and hypothesis that I've outlined in this chapter. The two individuals that left their base camp and set up a satellite camp on a ridge had obviously disrupted the lifestyle of a Bigfoot, thus the screams. The area they were hunting is east of the reservation, and is an area near where they recently had fires. The report is fairly recent, 1980. And the geography of the area hasn't changed substantially. The encounter for the campers also falls into another belief I hold about Bigfoot. It is reluctant to approach or make itself known to groups of 3 or more. In this incident, the Bigfoot was making itself known. People weren't leaving, so it appears that it took a little vengeance out on their mule. Thus its hysterical state. It was almost as though the Bigfoot knew that when people get into their tents at night, they aren't leaving. These people were getting into their tent when the attack on the mule took place. See, I'm thinking something a little more animalistic. I believe that most hikers do not camp on a ridge. Ridges generally have more wind, more inclement weather, and usually do not have shelter or water for campers. I believe that if researchers camped on ridges and looked for wildlife paths and stayed in groups no larger than 2, Bigfoot encounters would occur, and more information would be developed. I find the witness's story quite believable. Bigfoot activity really started to accelerate in Hoopa beginning in September of 2003. I conducted an exhaustive periodical search of the Hoopa area for this time frame and came across the following article. North Coast Journal Weekly ran the following story on September 25th, 2003. Fire and more fire. Great swaths of northern Humboldt were shrouded in smoke last week as 2 wildfires destroyed over 11,000 acres. Though it was the smaller of the 2, the canoe fire in Humboldt Redwood State Park proved more troublesome. Just as the Journal was going to press, the California Department of Forestry ordered a precautionary evacuation of the Salmon Creek area. The larger Honeydew Creek fire broke out in the Kings Range and for a time looked to threaten Shelter Cove. CDF spokesperson Ernie Roll said that the fire was behaving itself Tuesday. This week's heat wave didn't help matters, though. Meanwhile, a Trinity County fire that took out 3,700 acres and closed Highway 299 several times last week was contained. The fires have also created progressively deteriorating air quality conditions throughout southern Humboldt and western Trinity counties, warned North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District. The article is an interesting look at what might have caused the increase in Bigfoot activity. Southern Humboldt County has always had Bigfoot sightings and incidents. Maybe Bigfoot was trying to escape the smoke and fire by heading north into Hoopa. Humboldt Redwood State Park has a long history of Bigfoot sightings. If Bigfoot is like every other animal in the world, it will flee a fire area. If there was a fire in the park, Bigfoot would flee the area. There is only one direction to run from this park, as it's on the ocean, and you must run east towards Hoopa. In this scenario, you have animals leaving southern Humboldt County for areas north. You have animals leaving western Humboldt County and going east, all points toward Hoopa. I have interviewed many local elders and tribal members about their belief in the upswing of Bigfoot activity. All of the people I have interviewed about this specific reason point to one reason and one fire. The Megrum fire. The Megrum fire in 1999. Megrum fire map. That's a map, all right. I think the issues that are causing the escalation of Bigfoot sightings and incidents are multiple events that put Hoopa in the center of the mix. The Megrum fire was one of the worst that ever occurred in the Trinity-Humboldt County area. The fire burned uncontrolled for many days and eventually destroyed 125,000 acres. As a comparison, the Hoopa Reservation has 88,000 acres and is 12 miles by 12 miles square. Many of the older members of the Hoopa tribe feel that Bigfoot lived in the outskirts of the Trinity Alps wilderness area and walked into Hoopa at various times of the year for food. They told me that parts of the wilderness area are so remote and difficult to travel that nobody expends the effort to see it. They state that this isolation makes a great home for Bigfoot. Inker McCovey is empathetic that the Megrum fire is one major cause for Bigfoot staying closer to Hoopa. Inker said that the fire destroyed so much acreage that Bigfoot will not be able to return for 10 to 15 years. The Megrum fire, combined with several other fires in the immediate area over the past 7 to 9 years, left behind significant destruction. Skinwalker Outdoors in the chat. Hoopa time. Hoopa! Get the blicky. Sasquatches are around. That's right. If you take into consideration the fires that have enveloped the region near the Megrum fire, refer to the Megrum fire map. No thank you. I don't think I will. And couple that with the fires and smoke that occurred in September 2003, you have several dangerous conditions that leave Hoopa, as the one safe haven. Hoopa has a large fire response team that is permanently stationed in the middle of the reservation. It is huge when you compare it to other United States Forest Service fire response teams in adjoining cities and counties. Hoopa has the team to protect the city, its citizens, and the infrastructure because of the livelihood of the tribe. It is based on its ability to work and harvest the land. Maybe Bigfoot has been taught a behavior that it will always be safe from fire if it stays in the Hoopa Valley region and reservation. Bigfoot obviously doesn't see the reservation boundary painted on the ground, but maybe it has learned that this area of Humboldt County doesn't burn like other regions. It is important to remember that the Hoopa Valley isn't a common topographical occurrence in the region of the United States. Valleys do not occur much in this mountainous region of Northern California, and as such may be an interesting anomaly to Bigfoot. The area in Hoopa, around Hoopa, and in the wilderness areas reveals fascinating behavioral aspects of Bigfoot. The stories of the witnesses are mesmerizing. Here we have Bigfoot sightings and their relation to elevation. Rufflemau in the chat says, Bigfoot's poopa! So, all these elevations, we got a bunch of sightings, including Patterson-Gimlin, all sorts. We got Zubies. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like an interesting one. The Zubies one in San Diego City. In the city. The Zubies sighting. Fascinating. Yeah, just a bunch of sightings, but they're all in the elevation of 2,100 feet to 2,400 feet. The Elevation Association. When I first started to investigate and conduct research into Bigfoot, I started from the onset to look for patterns or similarities in the sightings groups. After my first trip to Hoopa, I came home and purchased a wristwatch that indicated elevation. Every time I went on an excursion to visit a sighting or incident location, I took the elevation. It's reading like a fucking Louis Farrakhan speech. The Elevation Association at the location. Almost from the beginning, I saw that there were associations based on elevation. In Californication, snow usually starts to fall at the 2,000 foot elevation, but it usually doesn't stay on the ground very long. The 2,000 foot point is consistent whether you are referring to the coastal mountain range or the Sierra Nevada mountains. One of the first locations I ever checked for elevation was the original site where the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film was shot. I had reviewed topographic maps of the area and found that it was 2,300 feet and just inside Del Norte County. 2,300 feet. Maybe I should say it like a normal person. Who cares? I went on to review a vast number of sightings throughout California, and found that many were in the range and elevation of what I have listed above. Most of the sightings in all other databases do not list elevations, but in some sightings you can determine elevations based on concise directions. I would encourage anyone with even a casual interest in Bigfoot to look at where the groupings of sightings are located and make your own conclusions. One area in California where the elevation association becomes quite apparent is in the Oroville area. There are many sightings in the same elevation region that are scattered throughout many years of sightings. I am definitely not implying that sightings and incidents don't happen at other elevations, because they do. Sightings have been reported above the tree line, and many have been reported in the Lake Tahoe Basin above 6,000 feet. In very general terms, it would appear that Bigfoot likes moderate climates and the ability to move in and out of different zones as the weather changes. The 2,000 foot region allows the creature to drop lower when the weather gets very cold, and it also allows it to step up into higher elevations as it gets warmer. Herds of deer and elk move into the alpine regions and down into the coastal range as winter and summer come and go. 2,000 feet may be the optimum location to center Bigfoot's activity. It rarely snows in the Hoopa Basin. It routinely snows at the top of local peaks above 3,000 feet. Snow stays on the ground throughout the winter above 4,000 feet. It does appear that Bigfoot isn't intimidated by snow and regularly makes treks into it, reason unknown. It would make sense that the creature wanders out into it for hunting and gathering excursions, and then returns to the comfort of its den at night, probably below snow level. The Bigfoot in British Columbia, Canada, must live with snow throughout the winter in certain portions of their region. How they have accommodated themselves for sleeping and what they eat is for another book. Affidavits and the Bigfoot investigation. And you know, when I'm writing a book about Bigfoot, what I start to think immediately is, man, this book needs a bunch of fucking spreadsheets and legalese crap. I am enjoying the book. I love all the Bigfoot stories. But having to scroll past, like, pages of fucking Excel spreadsheets, roll them up and smoke them, brother, because I'm not reading all that crap. You know how we do? We just burn through this shit. Talk about Bigfoot. I don't want to bring math into this. Don't bring fucking constitutional law into this. Bigfoot has no rights. As someone who has interviewed thousands of victims and witnesses of crimes, I can attest to the importance of proper interviewing techniques. In conjunction with interviewing a victim of a crime, if you're lucky, you will solve the crime and interview the suspect. Suspect interviews are much different than victim or witness interviews. Suspects tend to be evasive and sometimes confrontational. Interviewing techniques vary according to the location, background of the suspect, time since the incident, information, and evidence gathered. There are also other variables. Interviewing witnesses is entirely different than interviewing victims and suspects. The witness usually doesn't have the same vested interest in the outcome of the issue as the victim or suspect. The witness interview can sometimes reveal more information than any interview the investigation undertakes. During the first few minutes of any witness interview, I usually gauge the intelligence and educational level of the subject. I may even ask some brief questions about their past with regard to formal education. If I am not certain, I may also ask about their abilities as far as eyesight, hearing, and smell. It may also be helpful to understand where someone has spent his or her youth while growing up. If they were raised in New York City versus the farmland of Iowa, this would give a witness a certain perspective. In other words, a person who spent their afternoons on a John Deere tractor might not have the same perceptions as someone who mostly had lived in a penthouse on 41st Street. Among the thousands of witnesses I have interviewed, I have never had a witness mistake someone walking from the scene of a bank robbery as being in a wheelchair wheeling away from the scene. I also have never had a witness claim that a suspect fled a location on a motorcycle and later actually find they were driving an automobile. People who live in an urban or suburban environment simply don't make these mistakes. In the world of illicit drugs and narcotics, I have never had an informant mistake a bale of marijuana for a kilo of cocaine. Narcotics informants who have lived in the world of narcotics know the difference between the two drugs and their packaging. The last comparison I will make deals with livestock. I have never met anyone associated with a farm mistake a cow for a Shetland pony. A Shetland pony is shorter in height than a normal horse, has a coat similar to a cow, but its snout and facial structure is much different than any cow. Do these comparisons sound ridiculous? They are meant to, as they prove a point. In my time investigating Bigfoot, I have had many friends and neighbors question me about the validity of Bigfoot sightings. Skeptics are always challenging witnesses. It's easy to do, as witnesses are never around later to defend their sightings. The challenge that skeptics level at most witnesses is that they didn't see what they claim they saw. I think it's human nature to question, and questioning isn't a bad thing in the realm of life. However, I do believe that skeptics need to rationally analyze their questions before leveling them at an honest witness. Most Bigfoot witnesses I have encountered did not approach me. I found them. Most of these witnesses told me they were initially afraid of being publicly ridiculed, and thus didn't want their story heard by the masses, until I told them of the masses of sightings that surrounded them. I have a close friend who is a CEO of a NASDAQ company who believes that he saw a UFO. He won't report it to any agency, and he doesn't talk about it publicly, but he claims he saw it. Once witnesses understand that there are thousands of other witnesses to Bigfoot that are just like them, afraid to tell their story, afraid of ridicule, and are adamant about what they saw, only then is the story easier to talk about. I think it is also comforting to the witness to be interviewed by someone who listens with intent, has formal education in interviewing techniques, and believes in the creature and has compassion for the witness. The witnesses also know that I will conduct a thorough investigation, and if I didn't believe their story, it wouldn't be in the book. I've made comparisons in this section because I want the reader to understand how ridiculous some of these accusations can be. Everyone who has slight familiarity with ponies and cows will know the difference between a Shetland pony and a cow. Anyone who has spent a slight amount of time in the forests of North America or has gone through a high school biology class will know the difference between a bear and a gorilla. Anyone. I've heard the skeptics claim that witnesses aren't seeing Bigfoot, they are seeing a bear. I think the same level of comparison can be drawn from the Shetland pony and the cow. I don't think a mistaken identity of that level is going to happen. There are times in witness testimony when I hear the witness claiming they saw a creature 700 yards away on another ridgeline. The creature was moving fast and it was dark in color. The creature appeared to have hair or fur and it looked big. This would be an example of a truthful description by many campers on a weekend trip to many state parks. This example illustrates how a truthful description could be construed as a Bigfoot, bear, moose, elk, horse, almost anything on four legs. I have heard claims that there are over 2,000 Bigfoot sightings on file in North America since 1950. In my time in Hoopa, I have documented close to 50 sightings and incidents, and I could only find 5 reported Bigfoot cases on all of the Bigfoot websites I searched. Sightings directly on the Hoopa reservation, he means. I have been in several areas of California where there were small numbers of Bigfoot sightings reported, yet as I spent time in the community and made myself known, the numbers would increase tenfold. If 2,000 are on file, then I believe that we can extrapolate that 20,000 may have actually been witnessed and not reported. The United States Justice Department states that only 10% of all rape cases are ever reported. Why aren't 100% reported? Well, there is public humiliation, fear of embarrassment, people not believing, etc. Maybe society as a whole needs to treat witnesses differently on a sensitive issue. Maybe the presence of someone who is interested, trusted, and wants to document facts allows the witness a certain comfort zone for them to recite their story. As I started to think through how I would document this story, I wanted to develop a method for documentation and validation that was different from past authors, and a method that added credence to the sightings. In thinking through legal documents, there have been many times where I have signed affidavits and declarations legally declaring under the penalty of perjury that the statement contained in the document is the truth. I now started to formulate my plan. Affidavits. I've read just about every book on Bigfoot that is commercially available. In many of the books, there are sightings reports with names of the witnesses excluded or altered, and in some cases, vague notations of the exact location of the sighting. As a customer and purchaser of the book, and someone who is attempting to learn something from the writings, I am always interested in every detail, precise locations, and the veracity of the witness. I am also a little reluctant to believe everything I read. Many of the sighting reports carry fascinating information, interesting Bigfoot behavior, and even more interesting witness responses. Yet through all of the reports, sightings, and writings, I have never found an author, researcher, or investigator to hold the witnesses accountable to their report. This sounds kind of fucked up. Dude, it's Bigfoot. Don't bring these dudes up on perjury. They are but humble tribal reservation leaders. As someone who has interviewed murderers, robbers, rapists, burglars, drug dealers, drug users, sexual harassment suspects and victims, and criminals from almost every other criminal venue you can imagine, the most difficult interview is with someone under the influence of a controlled substance. People who are using a mind-altering drug don't have the same physical responses when lying as someone who is sober. In my years in law enforcement, I have taken many classes that taught how to distinguish an honest response versus a deceptive answer. These classes also taught the proper method to phrase a question to elicit an honest response, rather than a leading question that goes towards an answer that the interviewer wants. All of these skills are immensely helpful in my efforts to interview witnesses and their sightings, and to determine who was credible and who was not. I truly respect and appreciate the authors who have written other Bigfoot books, but I doubt that any have had the educational and vocational classes I have had in interviewing and interrogation. I believe that my background assisted me in weeding my way through many sighting reports I accumulated. When a witness in a criminal or civil hearing is willing to legally stand behind their claim or citing, they may be asked to sign an affidavit or declaration. Both statements are legally binding, and under both scenarios, you are legally stating under the penalty of perjury that your statement is truthful and accurate. If it is found your statement is not true, then you can be prosecuted under perjury statutes of the state of California. These statements should not be taken lightly, and they were never signed by any of my witnesses without some type of questioning by the signee. When I first instituted the practice of requiring an affidavit, I wanted a policy that was easily understood and could be documented and tracked. The first requirement to use the affidavit was that the witness had to make a claim that they actually observed a Bigfoot. If a witness claimed they heard sounds, smelled odors, or something of an equivalent nature, then an affidavit was not required. If a witness claimed an actual Bigfoot sighting, I would investigate and document their information. There were many times where I documented the interview and investigation and sent it to the witness for review. The witness would read the document, make minor changes, and send the document back for correction. I would correct the document and send it back for signature. If I did not receive the document back, I would contact the witness and attempt to understand what the issue was for the delay, but this was very rare. I had several witnesses ask why I was utilizing a formal procedure, an affidavit, for documenting sightings, but I never had someone refuse to sign. There were a few occasions where the investigation results didn't support the witness statement. In those instances, I would not forward an affidavit and would interview the witness again to clarify the ambiguities. If, after the second or third interview, I was still not satisfied with the veracity or honesty of the witness, then the story was not included in the sightings group. All this cop shit got my throat hurting. The affidavit evolved in the hopes of subtly pushing people away who may not have been totally honest. It was one more mechanism to ensure that the sighting reports we investigated were legitimate and honest, and that the people were confident in what they observed. In every case, the affidavit made people think about what they were stating. Every witness read the affidavit. Some changed the wording and location or description, and some asked questions. I firmly believe that all of the witnesses saw what they claimed, and I doubt anyone exaggerated their incident. If the affidavit did anything positive to this investigation, it ensured that the witness statement was 100% accurate and there was no embellishment of the sighting. There were incidents that I believed to be significant where I requested the witness sign an affidavit. On those few occasions, I knew I would be expending significant time and resources investigating the claim, and I wanted an absolute commitment on the part of the witness to their story. I never had a witness refuse to sign an affidavit under these conditions. A statement signed under the penalty of perjury is not a guarantee that the statement is 100% correct, but it is a guarantee that the person is claiming under the penalty of perjury that the statement is accurate. There are several statements in this book where there were multiple witnesses to the same sighting. In each incident, all of the witnesses made an affidavit. These are compelling stories where the witness statements are extremely close in their descriptions. There are other methods to ensure that a witness is telling the truth, but they are expensive and cynics will claim they are rigged. The polygraph test, lie detector, is an extremely accurate means to test the honesty of a sane and sober individual. It has received a bad name by the mainstream press, yet the United States government regularly uses it on its own employees to determine if they are being honest. The Federal Bureau of Investigation routinely polygraphs their own agents if there is any question they are telling the truth in an internal investigation. If they refuse to take the test, they are terminated. The polygraph is only as good as the administrator giving and reading the test and deciphering the results. To correctly and accurately administer a polygraph test and read its results, you must administer a drug and alcohol test to determine the individual isn't under the influence of something while taking the test. The total cost would be over $1,000 per individual, cost prohibitive to this author. The affidavit was one tool that was fairly inexpensive to implement, made witnesses concentrate and accurately depict their sightings, and it steered people clear of me who wanted to fabricate sightings. I actually believe that the affidavit made the witnesses feel more comfortable with my process, as it was formalized and I was legally binding the witness to the sighting, and it appeared to many to be a professional method of documentation. The affidavit, which is a listing of the basic facts of the sighting, is a very sterile document. The feelings, expressions, and color of the story are provided in my description of the incident that is in the sightings reports section of the book. Should the veracity of the sighting ever be questioned or a witness ever recant their sighting, I would refer to the affidavit for support and backing. Chapter 4. I feel shitty with how I fucking read that last paragraph. I always like to read paragraphs properly as I'm going out. I didn't do that there. Now I'm going to feel unsatisfied. We're a little over an hour in. I'm going to read one of these sighting reports. We'll get into chapter 4 and then we'll call it a day. Chapter 4. Incidents involving Bigfoot. Hank Maston, foreman, Hoopa Modular Homes. Incidents number 1, 1966, number 4, 1970, number 16, 2005. I was referred to Hank by members of his family and was told he was an individual who has had Bigfoot experiences in his entire life. He's had experiences his entire life. Hank lives approximately 1,000 feet further down Lower Mill Creek Road from Inker-McCovey. Hank's residence is one of the last homes on the road before it dead ends at Mill Creek. I made a few initial attempts to contact Hank, but we kept missing each other. I finally found him home at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. Hank politely asked me to come back the next day, as he was trying to get some sleep. I arrived at Hank's house at 5 p.m. on Friday. It was on a lonely stretch of Mill Creek Road without neighbors nearby. Hank gave me an unnerving look and questioned me extensively regarding why I wanted to know about his Bigfoot experiences. After a 10-minute dissertation about my motives, Hank seemed to relax and slowly edged his way into his lifelong experiences with the creature. Hank started his story by saying that he is a Hoopa tribal member, graduated from Hoopa High, and that he has lived his entire life in and around Hoopa. He said that he is presently separated, does not have kids, and is a foreman at a local Hoopa business, Hoopa Modular Homes. Hank said that the farthest that he has traveled from his home is Minnesota, when he vacationed with the Hoopa softball team to the Indian National Softball Finals. He said that both times they went to the finals, they lost the game by 1 run. That's our boy, Hank Maston, standing in the front yard where he found Bigfoot tracks. His house can be partially seen at the far right side of the photo. Hank said that when he was growing up, he spent a lot of time with aunts, uncles, and cousins camping, swimming, and relaxing in the rivers, creeks, and lakes around Hoopa. The first unusual incident occurred when he was 5 years old and camping at Mill Creek Lake. The lake is an 8-mile drive outside town on a dirt road east of Hoopa, and an additional short hike on a well-maintained trail. Hank said that the trout fishing is superb, and the camping is quiet and serene normally. He stated that he was 5 years old and camping with his parents, and he remembers that it was late, dark, and cold, and he was in his sleeping bag. He stated that they all heard a very loud scream, and that he seemed to be that seemed to be several hundred yards away. A very loud scream that seemed to be several hundred yards away. Hank said that the noise scared him a lot because it was something he had never heard. He remembers his dad telling him not to worry because it was only a mountain lion looking for a friend. Hank said he believed his dad at the time, but he never forgot the scream. Approximately 9 years later, after hearing that first scream, Hank was camping, netting, and barbecuing on the Trinity River with some friends. They were staying on the western bank, just north of Tishtang Creek. Hank said that it was July or August in 1970 or 1971, and it was a warm night. He and Clifton Wallace, now deceased, and 3 other friends had just finished setting nets in the river and had started to barbecue hot dogs and marshmallows. It was probably close to 12:30 or 1 a.m. when they heard a very loud scream coming from directly across the river. Hank said that he heard the scream before, up at Mill Creek Lake, when he was 5 years old, as previously stated. But this scream was louder than the lake incident and occurred several times over a 10-minute period. Hank said that the scream had everyone's attention, and they were a little on edge. After 10 minutes of screaming, he said that a huge boulder, over 40 pounds, came flying in their direction from the area of the screaming. The boulder landed in the middle of the river. It wasn't too close, but it was close enough to scare all of the boys. Immediately after the first boulder, 6 to 9 more boulders came in their direction. After approximately 10 huge boulders were thrown in their direction, the boys decided to get out of the area. They quickly gathered up their belongings and retreated to a friend's front lawn, safely out of boulder range. The next morning, Hank said that he and his friends went back to the riverfront campsite, and could easily see the boulders in the sandy river bottom. He remembers all of the boys swimming out to the center of the river and trying to retrieve just one of the small boulders, but they couldn't move it. Hank believes the boulders weighed 40 to 50 pounds and were thrown in the air over 200 yards. He maintains there was no possible way that any man could have thrown the boulders the distance that they saw them propelled. Hank guessed that he wouldn't be able to get a boulder to the river's edge even if he rolled it from the flat where the boulders were tossed. An interesting note on this encounter is that there are many documented Bigfoot incidents that involve people who are barbecuing hot dogs. The incidents sometimes involve rock throwing, yells, and even visitations. There might be something about the odor, the people's presence, or maybe it's just coincidental because so many people cook hot dogs because so many people cook hot dogs while they're outdoors. Maybe they could be cooking anything for the incidents to occur. Maybe Bigfoot associates the smell of cooking hot dogs with children, and this sparks its curiosity. That's creepy. Hank's third incident was closer to home, more recent, and an actual sighting, although classified as an incident. The winter of 2004 to 2005 in Hoopa had many, many days of heavy rain. It was a tough winter that was cold, wet, and dark. On a weekend night in January 2005, Hank had two female friends at his house, and they were all making Indian art. Hank remembers that they had stayed up the entire night talking and doing various art projects. He said it was about 4:30 a.m., raining heavily outside and very smoky in his house. He said that he needed to get some fresh air and decided to get in his car, drive to the end of Mill Creek Road, and see how far the creek had risen during the night. He said that he was almost to the end of the road and had gone off the paved portion when he passed a fir tree on the right side of the car. He said that he was at the point of where he was going to turn around when he noticed a huge shadow stand up from behind the fir tree directly next to his passenger side. He said that the shadow took up the entire right side of his car. It was close to 7 to 8 feet tall, but it was too dark to distinguish specific features. Hank said that he quickly turned his car around and drove right back to his house. He parked his car, entered the house, and made a decision not to say anything to the women so they wouldn't be frightened. Hank said he was home only a few minutes and back to work on his art project when one of the women in his house looked at him and said, "Someone is outside." Hank told her she was crazy, but she insisted that she felt the presence of someone outside. Hank said he opened his front door, quickly looked outside, and closed the door. It was still dark, pouring rain, and there was no way he was going out to look, and he said he really didn't want to see anything. At approximately 7 a.m., with the first light of day, Hank said he went out to look around. He walked out to the entrance of his driveway and saw huge footprints in the dirt adjacent to his front fence. The grass in the area was matted down with such force that it left a deep indentation in the ground, many inches deeper than his foot could make. He said that he followed the tracks around to the side of his yard and back down into Mill Creek. Hank guessed that the tracks had a stride of over 7 feet and were indented 3 to 4 inches in the grass and dirt. He stated that the tracks appeared to be 20 to 24 inches long and much, much wider than any human footprint. Hank said that the print would remind you of a barefoot human print with large, distinct toes. The next evening, Hank was lying in bed and thinking about the previous night. He knew that the Bigfoot had followed him down the road from where he saw it by the creek. The question that he continually asks himself is what the Bigfoot wanted, or what it was interested in, or was it just curious? During Hank's explanation of his incident, he stared directly into my eyes with an intense determination to explain the story methodically and carefully. He sometimes hesitated and was careful in using words that correctly explained what had happened. Near the end of our meeting, Hank volunteered to escort me into restricted areas of the reservation. He even explained how he and relatives had built roads into certain areas where tribal elders believed Bigfoot resides. The elders tell members to stay clear of these areas and give the big people the area they need. Hank stated that he was serious in his offer, and that anytime I needed a guide into those restricted zones, he would take me. He also signed an affidavit covering all of the incidents and sightings. bone time. We're going to leave bones for next time. We'll get to the bones, don't worry. Bigfoot got bones, baby, and we're going to talk about that on my next stream. Yakobees.com. Listen to the podcast, buy that merch, hit that merch tab, patreon.com/yakovalive if you want to come hang out in the Discord. Catch you next time with more The Hoopa Project by David Paulides.